Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news. You're listening to the Bloomberg Balance of Power podcast. Catch us live weekdays at noon and 5 p.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts or watch us live on YouTube.
Here in New York for the last day before we have to head back to Washington, which will be the center of all of our attention, scheduled half an hour from now. I guess it's always our center of attention for Joe Matthew and myself, but especially when you have the President of the United States, Donald Trump, and the richest man in the world, Elon Musk, set to give a joint press conference together. This could get interesting. 1:30 p.m. is when it's supposed to kick off. We'll see how much we stick to that timing, but we know what it'll be about, Joe, and it's about the Doge.
Is X going?
That's my question. He's at the White House a lot.
I have big questions about the optics here. Is he standing next to the desk with the president sitting? Do we have podiums in the Oval Office? It's a curious venue
What
for
hat
an
will
event
Elon
like
be
this.
wearing?
What hat will he wear? And will actual questions be, taken by reporters? So it, like you said, it's set for 1:30. Probably not on time, as few things are at the White House, no matter who seems to be living there. But when it begins, we'll bring it to you live, of course, right here on Bloomberg. Then we reel into the 5 o'clock speech at U.S. Steel, Kaylee. That's being billed as a big rally and could keep us up a little bit later than usual tonight.
Yeah, he has a tendency to speak for a while at these kind of things. And we assume that we're going to get more details about the U.S. Steel Nippon partnership or deal, whatever it is, if the United States is getting a golden share in this and will still have full control over this company or not, knowing that there does seem to have been a tone shift between campaign Donald Trump, who said this needs to stay in U.S. hands. No way this deal can go forward, versus President Trump, who is much more open to this idea after the CFIUS review.
We talked to Stephen Myron about this a couple of days ago on Balance of Power and asked him about the terminology here, and he didn't seem to care as long as the jobs were preserved and the jobs added, the investment dollars were made. But this idea of a golden share has got our attention, and I suspect we'll hear about that later from the president. Joe Doe is watching all of this from his perch at Bloomberg, our metals and mining reporter with his eyes on U.S. Steel. Joe, it's great to have you with us. Welcome to Balance of Power here on Bloomberg. Can you tell us what you understand about the structure? Because this sure looks like a takeover, at least when you look at the dollars involved here, and not unlike the deals that had been proposed, to Kaylee's point, not favored by Donald Trump or Joe Biden. But tonight he's going to be talking about a partnership and a company that the U.S. government will help control. How does it work?
Yeah, Joe, that is the question. What is the structure of whatever this deal is? And I think we're still a bit in the dark. We're maybe starting to see some bits and pieces flow out. Of course, earlier this week, one of the senators here from Pennsylvania had mentioned the $14 billion supposedly being invested by Nippon Steel into U.S. Steel. But I think, listen, the investor class is watching very closely. They do want to know what this deal actually means. The golden share, let's think of it more like a mitigation agreement, right? That's the national security agreement. Golden share, I don't know if it's actually a golden share. That might just be branding. But the point here is, what is the United States federal government place going to be in this entire thing? Are they going to have veto powers over how much production can be shut down or not shut down? Are they going to have veto powers over jobs? How many can be cut in bad times and good times, right? I mean, right now, all we're talking about is, does this deal get done or not? But after the deal is supposedly done, this goes back to being a steel company. And steel companies are still commodity companies that go with the ups and downs of the market.
Well, that's very true. And of course, it being a steel company is why, initially at least, President Trump, like President Biden before him, was opposed to this deal, because they said there's great national security implications and interest the United States has in retaining its own steel production capacity. I want to ask you about a different element of the commodity space, though, specifically critical minerals, Joe, because President Trump today was talking about China not abiding by the terms agreed to in Geneva in regard to the trade agreement. The USTR Jameson Greer indicated that one of the big sticking points may be that critical minerals were not flowing in the way that China promised they would after they restricted them in retaliation for President Trump's very high tariffs. Do we have a sense of the critical minerals flow, what actually is happening?
You know, over the past 2 weeks, I've been in discussions with various people that are in this critical mineral space, the rare earth space, and they have indicated, listen, it's not like anything drastically changed with the new trade deal. The new trade deal was very specific about companies that would have certain things lifted on them. But remember, the export controls that were implemented by China, I think this is what they're really getting at here, with these 7 rare earths that are implemented the day after the President of the United States mentioned the reciprocal tariffs. Those export controls went on every nation. It wasn't just the United States. So I think there's a procedural thing here that might be under discussion with Chinese officials and U.S. officials, which is this isn't just a U.S. thing, so it's not just a specific U.S. discussion. So right now, as we understand, it's not clear that these export controls have been lifted, but it's also not clear that it was ever agreed to in the beginning that they would be lifted in the way that the president seems to be suggesting.
All right, Joe Doe, we appreciate it. Bloomberg Metals and Mining reporter doing God's work literally on the side of the road in Pennsylvania, where President Trump will be today with an umbrella in hand. Our audience on Bloomberg Radio is missing how hard Joe is working for us today, surviving the elements to cover this U.S. Steel visit that will be happening later. We really appreciate it. But of course, before we can get to U.S. Steel later this afternoon, we have to get through a joint press conference between President Trump and Elon Musk first. It's scheduled to begin just over 20 minutes from now, and we want to get into it with our political panel. Bloomberg Politics contributors Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano are with us. Rick, of course, is a Stone Court Capital partner and Republican strategist. Jeannie, a Democratic analyst and senior democracy fellow at the Center for the Study of the Presidency and Congress. His days as a special government employee, Jeannie, are about to be over. They're going to talk about all of the work the Doge has done over that time to shrink the size of the federal government. We do know thousands of people's lives have actually been affected by layoffs in the federal government, but it doesn't seem that the kind of money Elon Musk said he was going to save, he got anywhere close to actually saving. So what kind of victory lap is this really going to be?
You know, Kaylee, I keep wondering, what does Donald Trump give him for a farewell address? Like a little chainsaw for his desk, or, I don't know, something like that. Coupons for free nights at the Lincoln Bedroom. I am so baffled by this because, of course, what Elon Musk is trying to do is to leave gracefully so that he can reconstruct his image and, of course, impact those sales in a positive way. To have a press conference now, I don't know how this helps him rehabilitate his image. But of course, the reality of Doge is that the $2 trillion in cuts promised, by some calculations, people are saying, so let's say by Elon Musk's calculation, it was closer to 160 billion in the end. But other people are saying, in fact, Doge cost money simply because of those IRS cuts to people that hurt the ability of the IRS to take in income. Either way you slice it, it is far less than he promised. And of course, they have a bill going to Congress now. But I am not convinced Doge is going to live on beyond Elon Musk and his chainsaw.
Rick, how is this going to work, chainsaw or not? This is the Oval Office. The president's going to be sharing space with a non-elected official, not a world leader. Are they going to sit on the chairs in front of the fireplace like you've got a prime minister in town? Does he have Elon stand next to the desk? This could be awkward.
Well, we've seen White House, Oval Office events in where Elon stands next to the desk. In fact, even X usually gets the standing room only treatment inside the Oval Office. And we've seen many occasions where Donald Trump would have people in his administration or from other countries come into the Oval Office and stand around the president's desk while he sat. So I think the physicality of this thing will be interesting to watch, right? Because I think there must be some pecking order for what treatment you get if you're on the good list or the bad list. Lately, the bad list is when you're sitting next to one another in the most formal posture.
How
and
true.
You get beat up. He's not going to attack Elon Musk. They'll be playful and they'll be interesting. They won't answer any of the questions that you want them to, but they see this as a long-standing relationship that will continue on. Elon Musk and the president say they'll continue to discuss the affairs of state. And yes, I do think this is part of what Elon Musk believes is his rehabilitation back to the private sector, where he can become popular again for the things that he's done to improve the country and the world, his inventions. And I think that would be the best outcome, is for the president of the United States to say, Elon Musk invents really cool things and I'm going to drive a Tesla and someday I'll go to Mars.
Remember when the Teslas were lined up outside the White House?
How could I forget?
A showroom.
Yeah.
We forget the things that have already happened in this administration. Rick, I do wonder, though, about your thoughts on what Jeannie was saying, which is that she doesn't believe that the Doge effort lives beyond Elon Musk. Knowing there was a Doge Caucus formed in Congress, there were lawmakers ready to take up this mantle as well, really pursue this effort to shrink the government. Does all of that just kind of fade to the wayside?
It's been a whirlwind in only a few months. Doge went from basically running the entire federal government to being an asterisk. And I think that's the real question now, is not so much the Hill, because they like to do their own thing. And the Doge Caucus, I think, was just a way to fit into the narrative with Elon Musk being so powerful. But at the end of the day, you do have Doge employees. They're sitting in these agencies. They are now under the thumbs of the cabinet secretaries, which happened even while Elon was there. And yet we do see active efforts on the part of this administration to implement IT reforms, including a very big contract for Palantir brought in by Doge to basically start unifying databases throughout the government. So if you blink, you might miss it. But the reality is there is a pretty significant effort underway that could substantially change things like privacy and government access to your data and the integration of data through different databases that is going to be talked about for quite some time.
What does Elon Musk have really to celebrate when it comes to the Doge today, Jeannie? Will it be cutting spending? Because the promise was $2 trillion on the way in, and it looks like $16 billion on the way out when you consider the wall of receipts. Or will it be the fact that he took the chainsaw or the proverbial sledgehammer and started to destroy agencies like USAID, which was part of the aim of this administration?
You know, I think he is going to try to celebrate something that I don't think deserves celebrating. And I think you just heard it in Rick's answer. The promise was the $2 trillion in cuts you just talked about, Joe. The reality is far less, maybe 2 or 3%. Even again, some people saying it may have cost taxpayers to have Doge in there. But what this is going to cost us, in addition to money, is issues of privacy. And the contract that Rick was just talking about is a very good example. We don't know how this turns out at the end, but the outcome of this, I don't think, is going to be known as it pertains to our rights and liberties for a very long time. And what's frustrating and fascinating about this at the same time, under a GOP that has long been committed to a smaller federal government, they opened the door to private company to go in and take away some of the most valuable information that we treasure and people don't want being shared. So I do think that that is going to be likely the legacy, but I'm not sure it's the legacy that Elon Musk is going to celebrate. And I would also just add that nobody is going to miss Elon Musk more than Donald Trump, except for the Democrats. I mean, the real losers here with him leaving are the Democrats, who have enjoyed this enormously and would like nothing else more than for him to stay, so they can continue to beat up on him, as he said.
Yeah, Jeannie, what are they going to run on in 2026 if Elon Musk is no longer a daily fixture in Washington headlines?
Yeah, I mean, you don't get it better than the world's wealthiest man coming in to make cuts, fire people, cut cancer research, food assistance to the poor, AIDS research, AIDS funding. I mean, it was just, tailor-made for the Democrats. They're going to miss him enormously. They'll just have to look back wistfully at Wisconsin and be happy and proud that they control the Supreme Court thanks to Elon Musk, probably.
This could be one of those events, Rick Davis, where Democrats are making ads for some time. If you were helping to prepare the president and Elon Musk to meet the press today, to what extent do they need to be on message?
Yeah, look, I mean, being on message in this administration is different than what I was taught how to be on message.
That's for sure.
And so, you would want them to say things that would actually appear in a Republican ad, not a Democratic ad. And that would require the discipline to say that they came to Washington to reduce the size and scope of government, its intrusion into your daily life, and that's what they've done. I mean, there are ways of spinning a meteoric rise in government and a quick exit in a most positive way. My guess is it'll be more entertainment value, which probably will disappoint the Democrats a little bit, but if you can sort of dodge that TV commercial in the making situation, I think you'd be considered very successful. But I doubt it. I'm going south on this one. I think I think this is going to be a circus, and it's worth tuning in to Bloomberg to watch it happen.
Oh, see, now I'm excited. Rick, yes, indeed. We just got our first view of the Oval. They're setting up the desk. Someone's going to be seated. That'll be Donald Trump, presumably. Where Elon Musk ends up is another question. Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano, a great panel, Bloomberg Politics contributors. We count down about 10 minutes to the start of this event. Assuming it's on time, we'll bring it to you live here on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Balance of Power podcast. Catch us live weekdays at noon and 5 p.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. You can also listen live on Amazon Alexa from our flagship New York station. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
We await here on Bloomberg TV and radio the beginning of a joint news conference between President Donald Trump and outgoing Doge leader Elon Musk, who is wrapping up his time as a special government employee. This media event, of course, meant to commemorate that, perhaps take a victory lap, but it also may be an opportunity for the press to ask some questions, both Elon Musk and President Trump, on un-Doge-related issues, like maybe getting some clarity from President Trump as to what exactly he meant when he posted on Truth Social this morning that China has totally violated its agreement with us, the U.S., of course, being us. So much for being Mr. Nice Guy. Still looking for clarity as to what exactly the violation China has committed here is, Joe, and how this factors into efforts to advance a trade deal between the U.S. and China.
No more Mr. Nice Guy. That's right. The markets didn't like that message. But this also comes, Kaylee, just hours after a federal appeals court turned over the federal trade court ruling that had the markets reacting as well yesterday. The push and pull here, the confusing headlines continue. Now the tariffs are restored, at least temporarily. And so there are great questions about how businesses are supposed to weather this kind of uncertainty. Of course, the same we can ask about investors. And I'm glad to say we're joined here in New York by John Denton, the Secretary General of the International Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Secretary, it's great to see you. Thanks for being with us here in New York. The ICC represents over 45 million businesses in over 170 countries. What are they supposed to do?
Well, first of all, it's great to be the prelim for President Trump and Elon Musk press conference. And if we want to be sort of zeroed in, I'm happy to participate in that discussion as well, because the message I would be giving is the same as I'd giving you guys here. I mean, we've just surveyed the whole of the ICC, and what we're finding is, and I don't think you'll be surprised, uncertainty actually is a tax. So what we're seeing on a global basis is heightened levels of uncertainty. And in a way, the decision of the court, the CIT yesterday and the other jurisdiction that there was a matter heard in, doesn't actually reduce the uncertainty. It actually clouds it even further. Because what we're seeing now is a lack of consistency. There will be changes in the coherence about the frameworks that will be applied. And what that says to business, large and small, is let's just steady on. Let's take our time. Why don't we delay? There's no cost to delay in a way. And of course, what we're seeing are things being, basically kicked down the road for another 3 months, which will generally mean for another 6 months. And what that also means is some things kicked down the road won't be picked up again. So we are seeing that on a global basis. Of course, there's different levels of uncertainty operating. There's a lot more interest and uncertainty because people are much more sort of zeroed in here in advanced economies. In developing and emerging economies, particularly I've just been in Africa, it's clearly partly bewilderment, not quite certain why we're being wrapped up in this sort of stuff as well. But also, we don't have the resources to worry about it. We also have other stuff just to get done.
Sure.
And so people just continue on. But what you're starting to see are basically people saying, let's just not hire that additional person or keep that open. It's interesting that the two matters, or the matters that were actually heard in the various courts on this issue, came from small businesses. What that tells you is small businesses are really feeling this as well. And they do not have the resources that large businesses have. They can't do war rooms, they don't do scenario planning. It's just problematic. And even for large businesses, this is very complicated.
Well, so when you say businesses, whatever the size, are largely just kind of wait and see mode still, are we seeing any kind of material reorientation of supply chains, thinking about shifting their sources of supply or where they are looking for end markets for things that they are exporting? What kind of decisions are businesses willing to make?
Well, the first thing, people are looking at this, but as they don't know yet what the final outcome will be, a lot of it's exploratory, and also to commit now and to discover that subsequently the actual tariff that was levied is actually unable to be levied and are going to be repaid. It's kind of like, let's just hold off here. I mean, I've just been in Mexico with the business community and government there, which we're working with them saying, well, hold on, we do know this with Mexico tariffs, USMCA, that any good that is USMCA compliant will actually not have to pay any tariffs. And we also know as a fact that only 49% of goods from Mexico into the US are currently USMCA compliant. But that's actually not because the goods aren't. It's just the cost of compliance outweighed the benefits. So they paid an extra 2.5% on the tariff for that. But now they're going to go up. We're looking at, there are things we can do. We can actually lower the cost of compliance. I mean, the ICC will create a tool or apparatus to enable that to happen. So businesses are looking with this mix of friction about how they can work their way through it. But committing new capital or reorienting your supply chain, that becomes quite difficult at this point in time.
You said something really interesting right off the bat, that uncertainty is a tax. We keep talking to economists who are trying to drive home the point that a tariff is a tax. So is this approach effectively a double tax on your members?
Well, I mean, the double tax regime, we should all try to avoid that.
Yeah.
But effectively, uncertainty is a tax because the cost of things goes up as you delay. And of course, a tariff is a tax. I don't think there's any disputing about that. The question, I think people are arguing, who pays the tax?
Yeah, well that's right.
The end, what we're seeing, even in the US economy, is consumers are going to pay that tax, and they're starting to pay that tax because you're starting to see in supply chains, you're starting to see in retail increases in costs. And we're seeing the sentiment move towards inflationary pressure. So that tax is going to come through and be felt by people.
Well, so when we consider the idea that President Trump says, whatever, if you want to call it a tax or what have you, it's going to bring more revenue to the U.S. But the other goal of this entire thing is to bring more business to the U.S., to have companies investing in manufacturing capacity here, making things in America rather than elsewhere. And I wonder what you're hearing from businesses in the international community about their desire to come to the United States, given this uncertainty that we're talking about.
Well, let me be 100% clear. This is the greatest economy in the world. Of course, if you're a business person, you want to have a piece of this, and you want to have more of it if you possibly can, and you want to invest in it. I mean, I'm an Australian. Australians invest heavily in the US.
Yeah.
But what we want to know are what are the rules around which we can actually make these allocations of significant amounts of capital. If the rules are not clear, the actual risk factor goes up and the cost of capital goes up. We applaud 100% any government seeking to improve the conditions that will enable investment to actually occur. I mean, I want more in Australia. I actually want more in Africa. We applaud that. But the way you attract capital and businesses is by having clarity around what the rules are and also how you enforce the contracts that you're entered into.
Yeah.
That's what we want. And that I'm sure is part of President Trump's vision.
Well, this is interesting, and I can't imagine what it's like to be in 2025, in the age of the second Trump administration, the Secretary General of the International Chamber of Commerce, with the comments we hear about globalism coming from not just the White House, but the MAGA community, the populist community that elected him. Do you feel like you're on an island as the face of globalism?
No, I mean, the world is so interconnected. It's just, you may, the way you describe it may change a little bit.
Is he on an island in a world of globalism?
Well, there's one thing that's for sure. The U.S. is one of the most connected economies in the world. So the president does not sit on an island. He sits on one of the most connected economies in the world. And that's actually one of the great strengths of the U.S. economy. In any issue about balance of power, the most connected economy will be the most powerful economy. So we hope that will continue. But the reality is planes still need to fly across borders. That's part of globalization. Mail gets delivered. You require multilateral agreements. That all happens. Let's not forget that the plumbing is still there. What we might call it might be different. But also there is actually a fair point the president makes, which I think we actually share as well. We need to make certain there are more winners out of the process of opening borders and enabling trade to take place across borders. But what we also know is that this has been one of the great enablers of economic development in the last 100 years. The reason we've been able to move Africa a long way out of poverty is because they're part of a multilateral or a trading system that functions. The reason we've actually seen a decline in poverty globally is because we actually have got rules-based trading systems operating. Nobody wants to see that go. And I tell you what, the US accounts for 13% of global trade. The 87% of the rest want to keep this going. And one of our jobs is to keep it going.
Well, you've brought up Africa a few times now, which obviously is seen as kind of a landscape of competition between the U.S. and China as to who can gain the foothold in Africa. Are you seeing evidence of companies anywhere, not just in Africa, but businesses looking to reorient themselves more toward China and away from the United States? As you talk about the U.S. being the biggest, most connected, powerful economy in the world, do you see risk that the U.S. could easily cede that to the second largest economy currently?
But I think the reality is over the last 10, 20 years, there's been a reorientation of trade anyway. There's a lot more what's called South-South trade. And of course, what we see now as the major trading partner for a lot of even Latin American countries is actually China, if it's not one or two. But what's really interesting is if you want functioning economies, you want a market-based system which is governed by a political system which is effective. Market-based economies actually lead to more economic development. One of the greatest calling cards for democracy is actually effective market-based systems. And of course, the greatest alignment on democracy is with countries like the US, Australia, European Union. They're not with state-led economic models. So the more we can encourage economic development, and frankly, the point I've been making in Africa, and I've been honoured to meet with President Ruto, I've also been in South Africa because I'm part of the G20, B20 process, is that the development assistance economic model is really diminished now. It's got to be replaced by something, and that's got to be the private sector-led model. And frankly, I think we're at one with the new US administration on that as well.
This has been fascinating. I hope you'll let us know when you're back in the U.S. We should continue this conversation.
Thanks very much. Are we being knocked off now for the
No,
Trump
God
market?
forbid.
Looks like they're going to start a little late.
Absolutely.
We just
Thank you
have to
so
take
much.
a break. But it was great speaking with you, John Denton, Secretary General of the International Chamber of Commerce, here with us at our global headquarters.
Thank you, John.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Balance of Power podcast. Catch us live weekdays at noon and 5 p.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts or watch us live on YouTube.
Balance of Power here on Bloomberg Radio, satellite radio channel 121, and on YouTube. It's a good time to do this, by the way, because Joe Weisenthal is coming up next. Search Bloomberg Business News Live to catch our live stream from today, New York. That's one of the great treats of being here whenever I have the opportunity to come to world headquarters, to come to the big city. You got to get a good pastrami sandwich. That's right. And you're really lucky if you get to spend some time with the stalwart. Joe Weisenthal, Bloomberg Executive Editor for Digital News. You have like a big title like that.
No, it's not. You know what? Actually, can I take this moment?
Yeah.
I've been trying to excise this aspect of my bio for a long time, and I keep finding random databases where that's stuck in, and then disappears. I'm just the co-host of the Outlaws podcast.
That's right. And band leader.
And I'm the one of the singers for the country music band Lightsweet Crew.
Sure are. I love that.
Yeah.
You're the Telecaster in the lineup at Bloomberg.
That's right. That's right. The telly. Someone else plays the Strat. Someone else plays the Gibson. I play the telly.
Fantastic. Well, it's great to see you, and I'm delighted you could come in. We always learn something when we spend some time with Joe. And yes, the podcast is called Odd Lots, but you probably know that because you subscribe to it. There's this idea of the taco trade has fascinated a lot of us. And I wonder if, because the best thing about you is you don't care about a lot of the stuff that we care about. You're really coming at this from the market's perspective. Yeah. So I can ask you if that's real or not.
So what I would say is that it does feel like every headline about trade, period, is like taken less seriously than the last headline. But I would even include, the various court rulings that we've seen. So, for example, there was that court ruling, I guess it was on Wednesday night, that said the tariffs were illegal. Now, if that had come out in, say, the middle of April, I think that would have been this huge deal, right? It would have been massive. And it's like, oh, look at this little court. It just overturned the entire thing. You got a little mark of bounds. And it didn't last that long.
Yeah.
And then there was another reversal the night. So what I would say is that there's sort of this, I'm trying to think of like the analogy in science, but this sort of diminishing impulse with every headline about tariffs. It's like, oh, Trump says the Chinese deal is off track. Yep. That would have been a huge deal, I think, in April. Now it's like, oh, just one of the headlines.
Absolutely right. Yeah. So then there's some truth to this boy who cried tariff thing.
It does feel
like
it.
You can only run the same play so many times.
It does feel like it. And it does seem like, if the message of tariffs and the implied tool for negotiation is, look, we are willing to take pain, to inflict pain on you in order to give you some concession towards us. And then each time you inflict domestic pain, and usually it's expressed in the stock market pretty quickly, then you sort of reverse yourself in a short period of time. I mean, I just think that's it. I'm not I've never taken a negotiation seminar or anything, but intuitively you would think, okay, the people on the other side of that take each one of these threats less seriously.
Yeah. The fact of the matter is, since the pause, I love these names. Somebody's made a lot of money.
Yeah.
And there's
that's
going to be a big question about market manipulation every time this happens as well, right?
Yeah, but,
you must hear from the volatility guys who are in heaven right now.
Someone's going to make a lot of money. On the questions of market manipulation, what that even means. Some people are very conspiratorial, right? Like, oh, who within the Trump administration knew what? And
who was buying
calls and stuff like that. But all of these conspiracy theories rest on some premise of internal White House communication and coordination, right? The idea that there is someone besides Trump in the White House who knows what's going on in Trump's mind, which strikes me as very unproven. The existence of this, right? Because to say like, okay, I'm gonna trade ahead of a trade announcement. I must know something that before Trump was going to say it. Does anyone in the Trump administration know what Trump was going to say before he says it? Sometimes people in the Trump administration say things, and then he comes out and undercuts them an hour later. So, it's a very strange market, but I still tend to be skeptical of this idea that there must be like people trading, because I'm skeptical of this idea that anyone actually knows what's going to happen in a meaningful way before they.
There's a lot of logic there. I mean,
there's a lot of logic.
There's a lot of logic. Learning
right.
things by watching them on TV. Right. That's going to happen again today at 1:30, about an hour from right now. As we told you, we're going to bring you into the Oval Office for this news conference with Elon Musk. It's like a goodbye party, I guess, without the cake. It's his last day on the job here with the 130-day contract. You know what the argument with Elon and the questions about conflict of interest?
Right.
This guy's the richest man in the world. What the heck does he care about making a couple of extra dollars in the government? Is that fair?
It's an this argument has actually been used a lot to justify when sort of people they're like, oh, he's already rich. So
it's a room full of billionaires.
Yeah, it's a room full of billionaires. I've never found that to be particularly skeptical. It's like, oh, they're all really rich. Why do they care about making money? It's like, I don't know. I don't think they got to be billionaires by not caring about making money.
Right.
All that being said, it does seem like Elon has become particularly ideological in various ways. I mean, I think he's getting very obsessed with the deficit over the years. And I think he's like, even a way.
So you were compelled by what he said a couple of days ago, this big, beautiful bill.
Something happened, I think, over the last year where he got really freaked out about just the sheer size of the national
Well, he
debt.
got to see it up close, right? I mean...
Or he saw some chart that someone tweeted at.
Okay.
And then it's like, oh, that's a line that's scary. I mean, seriously, it could be that too. I mean, the screen poisoning. It's like, it comes for us all if we spend too much time on the internet.
Right.
He spends a lot of time on the internet.
Yes.
You get really obsessed with something. Various things seem to have happened in his life that have put him into an more ideological posture than maybe he once was when he was just a guy building a business and trying to figure out ways to work with or work around the federal government. So, but look, it's not clear what was particularly accomplished by any measure, either in terms of a deficit reduction or, quote, making the government, government efficiency, right, Doge. So I don't know if he feels as though he has accomplished anything or as Doge has accomplished anything, but at least, like he said in that interview recently, I guess it was with CBS, certainly on the deficit side, he's disappointed.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we're going to get to do this in real time with Joe Weisenthal, James, right? We have headlines crossing the terminal right now.
Here we go.
U.S. plans wider China tech sanctions. Here we go, indeed. With subsidiary crackdown, people familiar, Joe, describe a bid to target subsidiaries. A new rule here would cover them, subsidiaries of Chinese firms under U.S. curbs.
Yeah.
He just posted, the president, the Democrat-inspired and controlled Congressional Budget Office purposefully, he says, gave us an extremely low level of growth, and he's complaining about the CBO as well. But I want to focus on China. Because
it's funny,
we
you
just
want to
said
focus
this,
on China, even Trump can't focus on China.
How true.
I mean, isn't that the funny thing there?
Yeah,
It's like, here's this headline. It's like, meanwhile, let me check the Democrat
exactly.
CBO. But yes.
But the market's obsessed with China.
And
so does this
And
count as a ho-hum, or are we going to freak out here? Because it looks like
the market's down.
We're getting down to our lows.
So S&P down about 1%. It's not nothing.
But
I think
that could be any Friday.
It could be any Friday. Absolutely. And we're still so far above those April lows. But, certainly below still the highs in February. What I would say is, taken all together today, all of the headlines that we've seen today.
Yes.
So now this headline, the headlines earlier about things going off
back
course. I think it's reasonable for the market to sort of, again, maybe reprice things lower.
Yeah.
And, maybe Trump wants to look tough again because people are talking about the taco trade or whatever
Exactly.
it is.
He's coming out angry today, right? He's going to be swinging today.
That could be an element of it here for sure that's going on.
So as Joe mentioned, S&P 500 down 1%. The NASDAQ is down 1.5%. Ryan, terminal user, just pops in to say the Odd Lots podcast on Elon was amazing.
Many people are saying it.
But they're also, I keep hearing this. What do you make of the story, the New York Times expose today, the drug use, the kids? That's not going to help the repair tour here, the rehabilitation tour, is it?
No, I mean, look, the guy's got a lot on his plate, and I'm not surprised if his personal life is a mess.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Right? I mean, I don't know.
Should an investor care?
A lot of people have speculated all these things for a long time.
I know,
about, theories about him.
You're still fascinated by him, though, right? Ooh.
He's a really interesting historical character. I mean, here's the depressing part to me. It's actually, I'll just say the part. There is this hope in the United States that we can have some sort of hard tech renaissance, industrial renaissance, and so forth, manufacturing renaissance. There is no question in my mind that Elon Musk is the best avatar, so to speak, for sort of American industrialization. He built one of the biggest car companies in the world during the 2010s, when most tech companies, et cetera, in the U.S. were just focused on software. It's extremely impressive. SpaceX is one of the most impressive companies in the world. His rocket company, whatever it's called, the satellite company, extremely impressive.
Starlink, sure.
It's a little grim, to my mind, when I think about the future of sort of industrial capacity in the United States, that the one individual who has clearly been an extraordinary success over the last 15 years or so in the United States is A, such a political lightning bolt, and B, seems to be having a hard time, keeping it all together, which is understandable on some level. Yeah. But when you think, we want to have this capacity sustained decade after decade after decade, no, we have like one guy. We have one guy who it's all right out. We have one guy whose company is leading the way with respect to rocket tech and reusable rockets and so forth. It's a little depressing that so much is hinged on this person who's, again, both politically and personally volatile.
Really interesting point of view. Now you're going to leave me in 2 minutes and go back to your lifestyles of the rich and famous.
That's right.
But I'm just, in our remaining 90 seconds, we just said a lot here. And after you leave, I'm going to get 10 more headlines. And then he's going to come out with Elon. And then there's going to be a post when he goes to U.S. Is this market investable? Or do you just back off for a while until he goes to sleep?
Here's what I would say. Look, I don't know, and no one should ever listen to my advice. But I would say there's two things. One, it probably is, you're supposed to ignore all these things, right? That's what every professional investor says, is that you're supposed to ignore all of these things and then think long-term it's all noise. But what I would say on top of that, maybe the market might be investable. Is this an environment in which a business wants to make actual real capital investment? Do you want to be building a new factory? Do you want to be expanding headcount, et cetera? And there, I think you could make more clearly the argument that the answer is no, that there is so much uncertainty about the policy side that it's like, well, why not wait 6 months, see if the smoke clears a little bit before we actually make a commitment? So what I would say is, I don't know about the market. You're probably never really supposed to pay attention to the news.
Yes,
you really should not be listening to the news ever, and yet people do, and which we both appreciate.
I love this.
But from a business perspective, you can understand why I was like, all right, if I were like thinking about, I want to build something new that's going to expect to last me for years, maybe I wait it out a little bit.
I'm so glad you could come over. The great
Anytime.
American band leader, Joe Weisenthal, he also co-hosts a podcast called Odd Lots, and it's a treat to spend some time with the stalwart. Thanks for listening to the Balance of Power podcast. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already at Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can find us live every weekday from Washington, D.C. at noontime Eastern at Bloomberg.com.